So there's an old saying that people always repeat throughout my life. Never meet your heroes. And the older I get, the more I understand why people have said that throughout my life. Because sometimes the people that we admire the most end up becoming the biggest disappointments of our lives. Sometimes the people that we look up to are the exact people who slowly are destroying themselves and everybody around them. And if you're young, broken, lonely, angry, or searching for identity, it becomes, really easy to mistake chaos for strength. And it becomes easy to confuse survival with wisdom. And, sometimes following the wrong people can become a fatal mistake. What's up, guys? I'm Christian Whitlow. Welcome to Fed by Fire. So growing up, I didn't really have traditional role models around me. I didn't, grow up surrounded by successful businessmen, mentors with college graduates, or people, teaching healthy ways to deal with pain. And most of the people that I, learned from were people that were barely surviving themselves. Addicts, hustlers, convicts, and people running from trauma. And, people masking pain with drugs, violence, money, and attention, or chaos. And when you grow up around that long enough, you stop seeing it as abnormal. You just become a part of the environment. It just becomes life. It becomes your normal. And as a kid, you don't really understand addiction. You don't understand manipulation yet. And you don't understand trauma. Or these cycles of self-destruction. You just see what's directly in front of you. You see, the tattoos, you see the money, you see the people in and out, who command attention when they walk in the room. And, you see fear, power, confidence, and respect. And when you're on your own, life feels unstable. And those things become attractive because they look almost safe, they look strong, and they look like survival. And around 2009, I'm going to tell you guys a little story. I was 11 years old, and my life was already filled with chaos. A whole lot of domestic situations in the house, a lot of fighting and addiction around me, emotional instability, people constantly coming and going, a lot of arguments, drugs, and trauma. The kind of environment, where your nervous system never really relaxes because something bad is always about to happen. But when you're a kid, you adapt to it. You normalize it because, you have to. And during that time, my sister, she was dating this guy. He was a tattoo artist, and I remember thinking he was the fucking man. One of the coolest people that I had ever seen in my life. He had tattoos, he'd done MMA, he was selling beans and doing tattoos in the kitchens, always surrounded by people. He had cancer in his hips, and, he still carried himself like, nothing could break him. And at 11 years old, that looked powerful to me. And more than anything, he took care of my sister. But it looked fearless. It looked cool. It looked like what a man was supposed to be. And I remember watching, how people reacted to him, the way he talked, and, the way he moved, and the confidence, the lifestyle, and more than anything, I, respected the fact that he took care of my sister and her daughter. And to a kid growing up in instability, seeing somebody step into that role mattered to me. And, I didn't care about the darker aspect or darker side of things because I couldn't fully understand it yet. I only saw the image. But now that I'm older, I understand, something that I couldn't see back then. And, that same environment that I admired and wanted so much to be a part of was slowly destroying the people inside of it. Having access to that lifestyle pushed, my sister's addiction deeper into full swing. The chaos, intensified, the drugs intensified, and the emotional damage intensified. And, what I thought looked exciting was actually a house burning down in slow motion, if you guys know what I mean. And that's, one of the most dangerous things about addiction culture and, the street culture. A lot of times the people that you end up idolizing are the people who are deeply broken themselves. But, when you're young, you're looking for a place to fit in. You don't see brokenness. You just see the confidence. You see rebellion, and you see somebody who looks basically untouchable, especially, when you come from pain, because pain naturally gravitates toward people who look powerful enough to survive it. But survival and healing are not the same thing whatsoever, and I had to learn that throughout my life. A lot of these guys that I looked up to when I was a kid, growing up, they were fighting demons of their own, and I couldn't understand at that age what all came with it. Some were addicts trying to be numb and trauma, but I really looked up to the hustlers, the vibrant ones that lit up a room when they walked in and had the money, the girls. They had it going on. Some people were emotionally damaged, empty. Some were dangerous, you know what I mean? Some were deeply insecure underneath that street image that they projected to the world. And the craziest part is that most of them probably started exactly where I did as kids, just searching for identity, love, protection, and belonging. And that's, what makes these cycles so dangerous is trauma teaches trauma, addiction teaches addiction, and chaos reproduces chaos. And kids absorb everything around them, whether people realize it or not. The people around you become your blueprint for what adulthood is supposed to look like. And nobody sat down with me, when I was young and explained exactly what came with all this, what addiction really was. And nobody explained how trauma can rewire your whole brain. Nobody explained how easy it is to become, the people you swore you never would. You're surrounded by, nobody explained that the same people who look powerful at 25 often end up dead at 35, or in prison, or completely alone, or buried underneath years of addiction, paranoia, regret, shame, and damage. And the truth is, a lot of the lifestyles that people glorify online right now in our culture have expiration dates attached to them. The streets will celebrate you while you're up and you're useful and can benefit them, and forget you the second you fall apart or you're in that cage. Addiction will convince you that you're in control, and you'll be in denial right up until it strips you of everything you have. And the same people that are calling you brother, that you're hanging with every day while you're getting money together or getting high, they often disappear or are banging your baby mama the second real consequences show up. I've seen people overdose firsthand. I've seen people lose their minds completely. And I've seen people destroy, themselves and their families with them. I've seen people become unrecognizable, myself too. I've seen addiction turn good-hearted people into manipulative people that, they swore they'd never be. I've seen trauma turn, scarred kids into violent adults, and I've seen how easily young people can mistake dysfunction for authenticity, because dysfunction is all they've ever known. And that's, why I wanted to make this video. Not to judge anyone, not to judge anybody, not to act morally superior in any way. But because the truth is, I became part of that same world myself. I followed the same path. I chased the same image. I made the same excuses. And I romanticized things that almost killed me, And for years, I thought surviving that chaos meant that I was strong, that I had proved something, when really I was just slowly destroying myself and my record while calling it freedom. This video is for young people who are still impressionable and looking for an identity, but it's also for people who are at, the very beginning of addiction, where the people who still think that it's fun, the people who think they can handle it, that they're different. This is for the people who think they can control it, for the people who still see the image but haven't experienced the consequences that come with it. Because addiction rarely introduces itself honestly, it doesn't walk into your life looking horrifying. It usually shows up looking comfortable, exciting, freeing, looking like a sense of belonging, looking like confidence. But it's all a facade, looking like an escape. But by the time you realize what it actually is, it's too late. It already has its hands around your throat. And sometimes the hardest part of healing is realizing that the people you once idolized were never actually healthy or who you thought they were. They were just wounded people teaching other wounded people how to survive incorrectly. And some of the people that I once, wanted to become, I wanted to be in their spot. They're dead now. They're in prison. Some are completely have disappeared into, addiction. Some have lost their families. Some, are out there on the streets. Some became shells of themselves. And honestly, some probably never had a real chance to begin with. Because we're all repeating cycles that have been handed down to us at the end of the day. And that's why it's important to pay attention to who you admire, who you surround yourself with, because eventually admiration turns into imitation, and imitation slowly becomes identity. So, if you're young, if you're green, if you're watching this, understand something. Just because somebody looks fearless, untouchable, doesn't mean they are. Just because somebody carries themselves a certain way, has money, tattoos, attention, hats, women, drugs, status, influence, it doesn't mean they're at peace. Some of the loudest, hardest looking people are actually the most broken people in the room when it comes down to it. And if you're somebody just entering, this type of chaos, thinking that it's still exciting, I promise you this: almost nobody escapes untouched. Eventually, that bill comes due. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, physically, and eventually it collects. It's just what it does. This isn't me speaking from judgment, by no means, you guys. This is me speaking from experience and from the heart. Because sometimes the people that we admire the most are the ones that were supposed to be the warning signs that we should listen to all along. listen to your gut, your guys, and just know one day that the people you call your family might be the first ones to turn on you. And, that's a painful lesson that a lot of people, from addiction, from chaos, and from the street environments eventually have to learn. Because a lot of relationships built in survival mode are conditional. They last as long as you're useful and beneficial and loyal, as long as you're making money, risking your freedom, getting them high, keeping the secrets, or helping people avoid accountability. But the second you change, you get sober, you start making good decisions, speak the truth, fall apart, or stop benefiting people, everything can shift just like that. And that doesn't mean that everybody is evil. There's a lot of good people out here, a lot of damaged people that just operate from fear, addiction, and resentment, as well as, survival and unresolved trauma. But when you grow up craving love and acceptance, betrayal, it hits different, especially when it comes from the same people that you would have sacrificed everything for. And, I've had to learn this the hard way, that blood, history, and loyalty don't always equal, safety or the same in return. Some people only love the version of you they can control. Some people only support you while, you're self-destructing beside them. Because misery loves company, and your healing forces them to confront themselves as well. And sometimes the hardest part of growth is realizing that you can outgrow the people you once thought you'd die beside. That realization can break your heart if you let it. It can also, though, wake you up, because eventually, you understand that not everybody walking beside you is walking with you. And some people are only around as long as you're dysfunctioning. As long as your dysfunction matches theirs. And if you keep chasing that validation from broken people, eventually, they'll help break you too. But guys, this has been an awesome one. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, tell me, some about you guys' story. If you're interested in being a guest, you can hit me up. All right, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.